All right. So good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy end of the week. Hope we're all doing well. So let's start with this. Does anybody have any questions about the assignments for this week or anything that we've talked about? Anything about AP exams? Anything I can help you with before we get started this morning? Anything specific we have questions about for this week? No?
Mm-mm.
Nothing at all? What, Charlenice?
No, nothing.
Oh, okay.
I have to cough.
Okay. You're coughing. Uh-oh.
No, no corona, no corona, I swear.
Jarla needs to get
No,
ready
I'm
to be
healthy.
sued.
I'm healthy. I swear I'm healthy.
Yeah, that's what
I
they
need to
all
see
say.
medical records for that.
That's what they all say.
I can't provide that, but like, I'm healthy. I swear.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine.
You got that Rona.
Oh, wow.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right. So then if there aren't any questions, we'll continue on talking about trade routes today. So we talked about the Silk Roads earlier this week. So today's going to be all about the good old Indian Ocean trade. Okay. So we're going to review Indian Ocean trade this morning. So that's where that's what we're going to be covering today. So let me go ahead and share the screen with you, and then we'll jump over to today's topic. There we go. So we are going to be talking today about Indian Ocean trade. Okay, we've already discussed the Silk Roads. Today we'll talk about Indian Ocean trade, and then at the beginning of next week, before we jump into Unit 3, we'll talk about Trans-Saharan trade. Okay, so that's sort of the direction that things are headed. Okay, so we have one more trade route to talk about Monday, and then that'll be the end of Unit 2. All right, so when thinking about Indian Ocean trade routes, okay, or rather thinking about trade routes as a whole, okay, generally speaking, they want you to know several different things about trade routes. Okay, they want you to know how they promoted the spread of culture, which we've talked about numerous times already, and we'll talk about that again today. Okay, and they want you to understand how they lead to the growth of these cities. And then you need to make sure that you are familiar with the Silk Road's trade routes, Mediterranean trade, which we briefly talked about yesterday, Indian Ocean trade, which you're going to talk about today, and then Trans-Saharan trade, which we'll finish up talking about at the beginning on Monday. So those are the examples of these trade routes that you can pull from. Now, like I mentioned to you the other day, I feel like trade routes and trade as a whole could be one of those topics that I feel like it's going to be very easy for them to write a DBQ about, as it spans a long period of time. Like, I feel like continuity and change over time about world trade, hello Blake, is a very easy DBQ topic. Okay, and so I feel like that might be where they're gonna go, but again, that's just a guess. We don't know anything. All we know is that it's going to cover something from periods 1 through 6. But I do feel like these trade routes could be one of those topics. I mean, we'll see on May the 21st, but that's just a guess. Okay, so once again, Okay, so I know you've seen this map before because I showed it to you on Wednesday and I showed it to you back in class, but these are some of the different trade routes that we've talked about and where they were. And one of the things I want to point out to you is that they're not really connected. Okay, so that's one of the things that you should realize, right? Indian Ocean trade, which is in blue, does not really overlap except in one instance, does not overlap with the Silk Roads, which is in red. Okay, and then Silk Roads trade really does not interact with the Mediterranean trade, other than the fact that the Silk Roads passed goods on to the Mediterranean trade routes. And then down in Africa, of course, you had the Trans-Saharan trade, which starts down in the city of Timbuktu, okay, and builds out from there. And then across the Atlantic Ocean, you have Aztec trade and you have Incan trade down in South America, okay, and those are operating completely independently of anything happening across the ocean. Nobody at this point is aware of the other's existence yet. So these trade routes, even though they do span, many hundreds, if not thousands of miles, for the most part, it certainly is not any kind of a global trade network. Okay, we talked about global trade not being a thing until colonization, which happens much, much later. These would still be considered at the time regional trade routes, just because they're not, involving the entire world yet. Okay, so global trade doesn't happen until later. This is still very much regional trade. Okay, and then here's another map that kind of shows you the same thing. This kind of shows you, this time what you're looking at is some of the different trading cities and some of the trading civilizations. And so you can see the Swahili states, for example, off the east coast of Africa, can become majorly involved in trade. Way up north, then you've got the Vikings, you've got the Byzantines, you've got Islam. So you have all these different examples of these trading states, okay? And then you can see with the dotted lines over in Asia, those dotted lines make up the borders of the Mongol Empire. So you can see that they're kind of very well situated right in the middle of a lot of this trade, okay? And so our objective for this lesson remains the same as the one from Tuesday or from Wednesday, okay, which is to talk about the growth of trade networks after the year 1200s. Wednesday, we use the example of the Silk Roads. Today, we'll use the example of the Indian Ocean trade routes, okay? And so the easiest way to think about Indian Ocean trade here is going to be, this is the aquatic version, the maritime version, the sea version of the Silk Roads, okay? It's the same concept, and as you're gonna see today, a lot of the same things are happening, okay? We're spreading culture along with goods. We're also spreading disease, okay? Until the New World comes around, okay? So until colonization, Indian Ocean trade was the largest of the aquatic-based trading networks, okay? It's the largest water-based trading network until we get to global trade, until we get to the Columbian Exchange, until we get to all of that much, much later on, okay? How big is it? Well, Indian Ocean trade starts in southern China, okay, and goes all the way to the east coast of Africa, to those Swahili states, okay? And the reason that Indian Ocean trade, aquatic trade was used and was preferred is because it's cheaper, it's faster, okay? You can put a lot more goods onto a ship than you can onto the back of a camel. So, and also the ship can obviously travel a lot faster than a camel can, okay? So it's cheaper, it's faster, and it's a whole lot more efficient. Now, what's different here, and this is an important contradiction, okay, between the Silk Roads and Indian Ocean trade. The Silk Roads, because of the expense, the Silk Roads were moving luxury goods. Indian Ocean trade routes, because they're a lot cheaper, a whole lot less expensive, the Indian Ocean trade routes are moving what we call mass market goods, meaning goods that everybody needs. These are going to be goods that are much cheaper to purchase and that would be considered essential items. So these are cheaper goods, far less expensive, okay? Whereas the Silk Roads are mostly a luxury trade route. This is a little bit different, okay? Now, one of the things that governs the Silk Roads, if you remember, are the monsoon winds, okay? There's no way that Indian Ocean trade is going to happen without knowledge of the monsoon winds, okay? These are very heavy wind storms that are going to dictate the direction of trade and when trade can take place, okay? And so during certain times of year, for example, during the summer, the winds blew to the northeast. During the winter, the winds blew to the southwest. So they always, kind of moved in that sort of diagonal pattern, okay? Now, that means, okay, that because this happens the same way every year, right? We know when it's monsoon season, even today, okay? Because these wind patterns are so predictable, what that means is that trade could also become extremely predictable, okay? you knew, okay, during this season, all of the ships are going to be headed to the northeast, okay? Or during the winter, all of the ships are going to be headed down towards the southwest. We know that. It's, these wind patterns are extremely predictable, okay? And so because of these winds, we develop much better technology as it relates to shipbuilding and as it relates to navigation, okay? And so you have all those different groups, the Chinese, the Arabs, the Swahilis, etc. All of those different groups are developing better and more efficient navigation and shipbuilding technology, which we'll talk about a little bit later, okay? Now, these are more like, what you have to realize is that instead of entire civilizations or countries, okay, we're really talking about cities here. We're talking about urban centers. These are more individual trading cities that people stopped in, that were kind of centers for this commercial exchange, okay? And so here's another example, if you look at the winds, okay? The way to increase or to make Indian Ocean trade better was to understand these wind patterns. You didn't want to sail against the winds because for a while it was impossible to do so. But even when the ships made it possible to sail against the winds, that slowed you down immensely and made your voyage far less profitable. So most people wanted to sail with the winds because it made these voyages faster and thus cheaper. So if you were going to attempt to trade in the Indian Ocean, you really, really, really wanted to make sure that you had knowledge of these trade routes, okay? And so what that leads to, then once they figure these things out, what that leads to is an increase in the volume or the amount of trade that's taking place. Okay, and if you look, we can focus in on three areas. India, obviously, would be one of them. The east coast of Africa over here in these Swahili states, and then down here in the South Pacific, okay, in the area around Malacca. Okay, so these are generally going to be three of the hubs, if you will, for trade along the Indian Ocean. And you can also kind of see how it's somewhat triangular, okay, involving all three of these hubs, okay? Now, I mentioned earlier that technology is an important piece of this, okay, and that without the increase in technology, you're not gonna see this kind of trade, okay? So one important new piece of knowledge, obviously, is going to be knowledge of the monsoon winds, like we already talked about, okay? But that knowledge of the monsoon winds is going to lead to improvements in shipbuilding, okay, particularly the sails, okay, how you build a sail. I'm not going to get too much into this because I'm not into shipbuilding, okay, and it can get extremely technical and extremely complex, and I'm not going to pretend that I understand everything about technology as it relates to building a sail, but during this period, you have two new kinds of ships with different kinds of sails on them. You have the Chinese junk ships, which are the ones pictured up top there, and then you have the Arab and the Indian dhow ships, which are much smaller, but again, feature a different kind of sail on them, okay? You also have a new navigational tool called the astrolabe. That was developed by Muslim scientists. Okay, and then you have better versions of the compass. Okay, the compass was not invented during this time period. It had been around before, but the technology improves greatly. Okay, and also understand that the astrolabe is not a compass. I think that's a very common misconception a lot of people have. The astrolabe is a tool that measures your latitude. Okay, so the compass is something different. So these three things really are the major technological innovations that are going to help precipitate and help fuel Indian Ocean trade. Much better and more accurate compasses, the invention of the astrolabe, and then these larger ships which could travel faster and could hold a lot more cargo. Okay, those are the three biggies, okay, the three ones that you want to take away, right? And then if you recall, we talked about the lateen sail, Okay, this is going to be the first one. Okay, now the lateen sail, what is important to remember here, this is our first innovation in the design of ships. And what's important for you to remember here is that these are the first ships with these sails in which the ship could actually sail against the wind. Okay, so your big takeaway with the lateen sail is that it allows the ship to sail against the wind. So you're no longer reliant just on the monsoons to kind of push the ship along anymore. Okay, now with these sails, you can sail against the wind. Okay, now if you take a look at these two ships, okay, what are some of the differences here? Okay, we have our Dhow ship on the left, and we have the junk ship, which was anything but, on the right. The Dhow ships, okay, were designed to sail in the Indian Ocean. They were not designed for sailing around the world, okay? They were not made for super long distances. This is not the kind of ship that you're gonna see Ferdinand Magellan or Christopher Columbus take off in, okay? These were smaller ships. They were designed for shorter voyages. The Chinese junk ship, on the other hand, as you can see, they were much bigger, okay? And they had very flat areas in the bottom, which were designed to carry a lot of cargo, to carry a lot of goods, okay? So they were very, very different. Both of these ships were important inventions during this time. Remember that the Dhow comes first, and then the Chinese develop the junk ships, okay? Now, the astrolabe, okay, again, all you really need to take away from this, there's, you don't have to understand the specifics of how this works, okay? And so I'm not gonna go through the whole thing. Just understand that the astrolabe was a tool that was used to measure your latitude, okay, relative to the stars usually, okay, or some known distant point, okay? That's really all you have to take away from this. It improved navigation, and it allowed these sea captains and these ships to be more accurate about where they were and where they were going, okay? But there is, don't get caught up in exactly how it worked, okay? Where they would have to hold it up and look for a point and then turn the little crank. Don't worry about all that. There's nothing about that you're gonna have to know. Just know that it was used to help determine latitude, okay, which made measurements significantly more accurate and allowed these sea captains to have a better idea of where they were and where they were going. Now, if we think about Indian Ocean trade in terms of what goods are moved and what goods are brought back and forth, okay, this chart kind of provides you some idea of the more, as I said, mass market goods that are traded along the Indian Ocean. Now, are there some luxury goods on here? Absolutely, okay? You see gold is on that list, porcelain and silk, okay? But look at some of the other items here. These are not luxury items. Olive oil certainly would not have been considered a luxury item, okay? Slaves, unfortunately, okay, were traded on the mass market, okay? Spices, not all of these things are considered luxury items. So again, Indian Ocean trade, more of a mass market, okay? More of a mass market trade than it was luxury trade. The Silk Roads, absolutely luxury trade items. Indian Ocean, not as much. One of the things that does get moved along this trading network is good old rice, okay? We know that rice is a Chinese, I don't want to say invention, but it's native to China, okay? And we know that the Chinese are the ones who are first responsible for moving it to different parts of the world. And so if you look at the map, the darker orange colors show where the rice came from. And then as that orange shifts to yellow and then later to green, those are the areas that the rice spread to. So all of Southeast Asia here, all of the South Pacific, that rice comes there from China. It's brought by the Chinese, okay? The greenish colors indicate where rice was brought to by way of trade, okay, by way of exchange. The darker colors indicate where it's native to. Now, if we were to zoom out on this map, okay, eventually we would see like North and South America would also be in that greenish color, because we know that the traders brought rice over with them once global trade starts, okay? And then we know that rice becomes a very important product in Latin American cultures, okay? But it is not native to South America. It's not native to Central America. It comes there with these traders, okay? Another example of a mass market good that gets moved along Indian Ocean trade routes is cotton, okay? Now, there is luxury cotton. Egypt produces some of the finest and most expensive cotton in the world, but there's also cotton, that gets sold on the mass market, right? There's a reason why the slogan for the cotton companies is the fabric of our lives, okay? Because I would venture a guess right now, if every single one of you looks at the clothes that you're wearing, it contains at least a certain amount of cotton, probably more than 50%, okay? So cotton is a very important mass market product. It's not a luxury good, okay? But you can see, if you look at the dashed lines, you can see how it spreads and how it moves out of Asia and then around into other parts of the world, including East Africa. And once again, eventually, this is a product that will make its way across the ocean into North America. And we know that later on, the southern states of North America become some of the world's biggest cotton producers, okay? During the 17 and 1800s, cotton becomes king, okay? And so all of those southern plantations, or rather many of those southern plantations, all produce cotton. Hey, but that, again, cotton is not native to North and South America. It's something that is brought over a little bit later on during the era of exchange, okay? Now, we know, first of all, that one of the areas in which trade becomes facilitated is in China, particularly with the Tang and the Song dynasty, okay? We also know that during this era, much of China's population migrates to the south. So a lot of China's important cities and a lot of their population begins to move to the south, because that's where the goods are for trade, okay? We can also thank the Chinese for the invention of the junk ship, as well as the magnetic compass. Now, once again, the Chinese did not invent the compass, but the improvement of the compass by using magnets, it makes them much more accurate, okay, which means that they can become far more reliable. And then we also can't underestimate within China the importance of the Grand Canal, linking the northern part of China to the southern part of China. Okay, and we have a very Chinese admiral by the name of Zhang Ji, who is going to be the one who's really going to be pushing this kind of international trade. Okay, under Admiral Ji, okay, China undertakes a whole series of maritime expeditions. This is when, because of all of this trade that is taking place, this is when we start to see China really establishing itself in Southeast Asia. Okay, so this is when a lot of that expansion happens. This is also when they develop the junk ship to help facilitate all of this trade. Okay, Emperor Xi launches 6 different expeditions within about a 28-year period. That is a lot, especially for that time period. Okay, they do capture a lot of Muslims. Okay, so there is conflict happening too. Okay, but his whole reason for this trade is because he wants to bring these people into the Chinese Empire and make them pay tribute. He wants them to pledge loyalty to the Chinese emperor and for them to offer tribute, okay? And we talked about the tribute system earlier this week. That's one of the reasons why he wanted to bring all these people into the fold, because if he brought them into the tribute system, they would have to pay money, okay? They would also, again, agree to be loyal and agree to be submissive, okay? And so his goal here is he's trying to bring order to this part of the world, okay? He wants to bring order to this part of the world. And he also brings a lot of things back, including giraffes. Interesting story about this. So on his on one of his expeditions. Okay, one of the things that Emperor Zhengji was known for was his love of exotic animals. And so when he would go visit all of these far off places, he would always try to bring back animals that were not native to China, you know, so that he could kind of show off, look at what I found, okay? And of all the animals that he brought back, the one that he was asked about the most and the one that was the most popular among the Chinese people was the giraffe. Okay, probably because of its appearance. You know, the fact that, you know, it looked so much different from some of the other animals that the Chinese had ever seen before. Okay, and so this map just very quickly shows the routes that he takes in all of his different voyages. Notice again, if you look at the map carefully, notice that he hits all of the centers of Indian Ocean trade, right? He comes through Malacca, he goes to India, he makes it to the east coast of Africa, to those Swahili states. So he hits on all the important places, okay? He hits on all these major trading cities. And again, the whole time he's collecting goods, he's trading goods, and he's gathering goods to bring back to China with him, okay? So that's our first group. Our second group of major traders along the Indian Ocean trade route were the Muslims, okay? Now, what's really important here and what's a really big difference here is that unlike the Chinese, who were very weary of merchants, as we know, Islam as a culture embraced the merchant class. They were very friendly to merchants, okay? The Muslims promoted merchants, okay? And they promoted trade and promoted commercial life. So they were very much a part of wanting to be very involved in this. It was not this sort of reluctant movement that you saw with the Chinese, okay? The Muslims were very active, okay, and were very, you know, very dedicated traders, okay. They would, as they moved around to different places, they would establish these little trading cities or trading centers, okay, what they call diasporic cities or diasporic communities, which would basically be areas in, like, let's say Africa, okay. Islam is not native to East Africa. But when the Muslim traders went to East Africa, as you'll see in just a moment, they would set up like these little Muslim cities, which were controlled by Muslims and where the people that lived there practiced Islam, okay? And they did the same thing in China. So as they're moving about and as they are trading and setting up these trading cities, they're also, as you're going to see, spreading Islam as a religion, okay? Now, it is the Muslims that start to trade in slaves, okay, on a large scale for the first time, okay. They certainly won't be the only ones by the end of all this, but they are going to be one of the first groups where you're going to see slaves traded on a large scale. And if you look at the piece of art that I put on the right-hand side, you can see that there. That is, you can see these slaves down here at the bottom, okay, and you see the two leaders up at the top here who are working out an appropriate price for those slaves. That's why they're putting money into those scales, into the pans on that scale, okay? And again, here you can also see what you get an idea of here is you can see how Islam moves again as they move to trade or with culture. And so if you look at the drawing on the left, okay, that is an Arab temple or a Muslim temple. And you can kind of see there, it's hard to see, but a lot of the people praying in that mosque, okay, are going to be Chinese, okay? So you have culture spreading here as well, okay? Before we get to that, if we just look at the other picture really quickly, again, same thing, okay? You have culture spreading along with trade, okay? So in this case, we're talking about religion. Okay, so our next group of trading states, okay, is we're going to talk about the Ravaya Empire, okay? Now, this is Southeast Asia. This is where Malacca is, okay? So this is kind of south, okay? A little bit southeast of China, okay? what's different about this particular empire here, and if you look at the map, you can kind of see it, is that rather than having one large trading network or trading city, this is a whole bunch of small trading cities. Okay, and so what you're seeing here is, you know, a whole series of small cities, okay, that are each engaging in this trading network. Okay, it's kind of like these little ports, and they're all competing with each other. They all want to become bigger, and they all want to become more important. But there's so many of them, and they're all offering different goods that it's hard for any one of them to gain any kind of a major um, advantage. Okay, and so what they're doing, obviously, they're all levying taxes on the ships that come through here, which means they're all making, excuse me, they are all making a great deal of money. Okay, and as such, okay, many of them, okay, many of these leaders become extremely wealthy. Okay. And they do end up attracting a lot of Indian rulers. Okay, again, Indian here meaning somebody from India. Okay, in fact, they actually believe that many of the Indians that come there might be gods. Okay, perhaps they are a reincarnation of the Buddha, or perhaps they are a Hindu deity named Shiva. Okay, and so they really took to the Indian traders, and they really especially take to Buddhism. This is one of the areas, Southeast Asia is one of the areas where Buddhism really takes hold. And even to this day, it is a very Buddhist area, okay? Thousands upon thousands of monks have moved there over the years. Again, even up to today, okay, this is a major Buddhist center. And so you can see, okay, how that Buddhist influence has worked its way into their art, into their architecture, like you see here. Okay, now one of their important cities is the city of Borobudur. Okay, this is again another area that's very closely aligned with them, and is another area where you see Buddhism really beginning to take hold. This is down in Java, by the way. Okay, so if you're looking at that other map, that's where we are now. And so what you're going to see here is, you know, Buddhism really setting in, and that's why I bring this up as an example. Okay, they are going to build elaborate temples. In fact, one of the things that they do is they build this kind of structure into a mountain that has 10 different levels with this long walkway leading through it. And the whole idea was each time you made it to a different level, you had made it to a different level of spiritual enlightenment. So that by the time you got to the top, if you made it all the way to the top, you were considered to be fully enlightened. Okay, and so they, as I said, really take to Buddhism. Okay, you're going to see a lot of Buddhist statues that gets carved in there. Okay, you are going to see them worshiping Buddhist gods, worshiping Shiva. Okay, honoring animals like the cow. All of these things, okay, are all Buddhist influences that are going to make it into this area. Okay, and you can see a couple of those examples there. All right, and then our next one, our last one, is in Africa, in East Africa. These are the Swahili states of East Africa. These are going to be mostly along the coast. Okay, initially, the people that live there speak Bantu. Okay, but that changes as trade increases, because a lot of the traders that come to that area are going to be Muslim. Okay, and so what's going to happen is Islam is really going to start to take hold there. Okay, and so along the coast, you are going to have a whole series of these different cities sprout up, and you can see them on this map here, all the different cities. Okay, as I said, initially Bantu is what's going to be spoken there, but as the Muslims come in, and as the Muslims develop more and more influence, you are going to start to see elements of Islam working its way in there. One of the changes that you're going to see is you're going to see a merchant class develop. Remember that an African merchant class, that is that is not an idea that is native to many traditional African civilizations, but it is a big Muslim idea. And so the Muslims bring the idea with them of the glorification of the merchant class, okay, and the people that are trading things like gold and leopard skins and ivory and quartz, okay? That merchant class, really begins to sprout up in East Africa. And each of these different cities was run completely independently by their own king, okay? So there was no centralization here. East Africa was very decentralized, okay? Here's an example of syncretism for you, okay? And the way that this is syncretism is you have an African lion here, okay? But it is made in an Indian artistic style, okay? And it's made from Chinese coins, Chinese metal. So you have a syncretism here of 3 different cultures. You've got the African lion, okay? Then you have the artistic style here is very, very Indian, but he's made from melted down Chinese coins. So you have 3 different cultures blended here in this little lion, okay? So this, again, would serve as an example of syncretism, okay? Another example, and I know I've mentioned this many times before, would be the language of Swahili, okay? Swahili is a combination of Bantu, which was the native language, okay, combined with Arabic words and Arabic writing, okay? And so if you were to write out Swahili, it would follow a lot of the same letter patterns as Arabic, including being read from right to left, okay? And the reason that this comes up is because the traders, the Muslim traders, and the native Africans needed a common language to communicate with. And so Swahili is sort of the mixing of these 2 languages, Arabic with Bantu, okay? Now, over time, as the Muslims become more and more powerful, Swahili as a language becomes more than just a language, and it becomes more of a culture as well, okay? A very, very heavily Arabic-influenced culture, okay? Now, pay particular notice to how Africa develops in terms of their religion, okay? Notice that a lot of the Islamic parts of Africa are going to be along the coast, okay? And then the yellow areas, those are areas that are going to be mostly Christian, but that Christianity comes later, okay? At the time that we're talking about right now, all of these yellow areas, they are still very much tribal, okay? Native faiths, okay? Christianity comes much later, okay? But you still do see Islam very popular along the coast, okay? And even in the northern part of the country. The reason that this is a different shade of red in this area here is because it's so sparsely populated. Now, the reason why you see a line of Islam cutting right through the center of this part of the continent is because of the trans-Saharan trade, right? Here's Mali over here, okay? Because of that trans-Saharan trade that is established by the Muslims, which we'll talk about on Monday, okay? So you do see that, okay? So Africa is kind of this very unique place in that you have 2 major religions all competing for influence there, all right? And then if you take a look at this picture here, this is a mosque that was built in the city of Kilwa, which is on the East African coast, okay? And so this kind of gives you an idea of the influence of Islam, the spread of the religion, okay, and the idea of syncretism, okay? So you can see how Islam blends here with traditional African culture. Here's another picture of the same mosque, okay? And so you can see Islamic influence here, right? You see the arches, okay? You see the domes, okay? These are all elements of Islamic architecture that have made their way in to Africa, okay? So this would be, again, an example of syncretism, okay? All right. And then Great Zimbabwe, okay, would be another example of this trading city where you see the influence of the Muslims. Okay, now the two major items that get traded here are gold and tusks, okay, ivory. Okay, those are going to be your two major trade goods or trade items that come out of the city of Great Zimbabwe. Okay, what makes Great Zimbabwe a little bit different is that it's not quite along the coast, right? It's a little bit further inland, okay? And so these were goods that they brought to the coast, okay? Think of Great Zimbabwe as being this kind of intermediary city between what was available in the African interior and what was available in or on the coast, okay? They sort of served as this kind of, you know, this kind of centralized point where coastal traders could trade with the traders from the African interior. And if you lived in Great Zimbabwe, the way that you showed off your wealth was through cattle, okay? Large herds of cattle. The more cattle you had, the wealthier you were. The city was very much known for its stone enclosures, okay, that were built without any kind of mortar. They were literally just stacked up, okay? And you can see that if you look at that photograph there. And so these diasporic communities, you know, all the different ones that I've mentioned are what is going to lead to syncretism, okay? Because they are introducing their own culture and it's mixing with the traditional culture. And so examples that we talked about today include the Muslim areas, okay, particularly along the African coast, as well as China moving down into Southeast Asia, okay? And so again, I'm not going to read all that to you. You can read it to yourselves later, okay? But again, just know that diasporic communities or a diaspora is a large-scale migration like that, okay? And I think you may have learned about that last year in AP Human, okay? Here's another example, okay? This map shows it as well. You can see how Islam has made its way into Southeast Asia, okay? And you can see how all of these Southeast Asian countries now have very large Muslim populations, okay? All right, so that brings us to the end of that discussion. And so I will now open it up for people who have questions, okay, or want to ask me anything about any of that. Now would be the time to go ahead and unmute your mic and ask away. Let me check in with the chat, see if there's any questions there. No, it doesn't look like it. Do the monsoons still exist today? Yes, they do. Okay. Obviously, it's much easier to navigate around them because we have much more powerful ships. But yes, the monsoons still very much exist today. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Like, to what extent do we need to like know about the goods that were traded in each place? Like,
I wouldn't worry too much about specific goods. I mean, I would know a couple of them. You know, I think it's more important for you to know that the Silk Roads were trading luxury goods, things like silk, obviously, porcelain, whereas Indian Ocean trade was more about mass market goods, okay? Things like cotton, things like olive oil, you know, that were more for the general population. Let's see, do people still use the monsoons to travel around? I don't know that they have to use the monsoons anymore, but they're certainly very much aware of them. And if you want to get somewhere quickly, you are certainly going to want to travel with a monsoon instead of against it. So I would say yes, they are still used, but maybe not to the extent that you might otherwise think. Okay, it's not necessary, but it's certainly sped things up. Okay, Kayla, it's okay. Any other questions?
Yeah. Is there like a limit to how much I can write on the DBQ assignment, or?
Is there a limit?
Yeah, so
No,
like how much
I would
can I?
say you're only limited by the fact that you have 45 minutes.
Yeah,
So
that's
it is a time
uh
assignment. I don't know how fast you type or how fast you write, but I would say that 45 minutes is going to be your limit. Okay,
all right.
that's what's gonna stop you.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody? No? Okay, so I will upload this this afternoon when I get to my office hours. I'll upload this video and I'll upload the PowerPoint itself. Okay, and then I'll see everybody on Monday. If you're celebrating Easter Sunday, I hope you have a happy Easter. And I hope everybody has a nice weekend. I will see you on Monday. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Like, share, comment. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment. No, I'm kidding. You don't have to do that. All right, so have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Please do it. Do it.
Do it, because Jan really wants to give away an iPhone at 500 people.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Like, comment, subscribe. I want 10 billion, quadrillion, dillion, billion likes on this YouTube video.
The road to 1 million starts today.
Yeah, I mean.
All right, have a great weekend, everybody. Have a happy Easter if you're celebrating, and I'll see you all again on Monday. Take care.
Guten Tag.
Bye.
Bye.